welcome to Evenings with Funmi. When we think of dinner parties online, on TikTok, on Instagram, it's always the same story. It's that slow, cinematic pan of a perfect table, the clinking of glasses, the outfits, the candles. It all looks effortless, right? But nobody ever shows you what it takes to get to that moment. And let me tell you, it's not easy. I love it, but it's really a full-time job. It's beautiful, it's stressful, it's chaotic, and worth it every single time. So as a wedding planner, I've planned events for hundreds of people, but this time it was different. This one was for me. I wanted to do a welcome back dinner to celebrate me moving back to New York City, and I was finally feeling ready to host again. If you've been following me for a while now, you already know when I was looking for apartments, I had a list. I wanted a balcony, I wanted a washer dryer and unit, and I wanted a space for a table that could seat 12. And before I even unpacked my boxes, I had bought this transformer table that can expand from 1 to 12 because I knew that I'd be hosting again. I really missed it. I miss curated nights that feel like a moment, a night that's both beautiful and personal. And in my head, it was meant to be an all-Black themed dinner party in the heart of New York City in Brooklyn. It was going to be chic, moody, sexy, vibey, like exactly what you'd imagine a New York City dinner party would look like until reality hit, guys. Because listen, the internet doesn't show you that dry spice that turns into a paste, the onions that ruin your makeup, or the candles that won't fit in the candle holders, So in this video, we're going to talk about everything that went wrong at my first dinner party. Not because it failed, it didn't. It was beautiful, but because every single thing that went sideways really taught me something about planning, patience, and presence. So in this first inaugural episode, I'm going to be breaking down how to plan a dinner party through the lens of my own mistakes so that you can learn from me, laugh with me, and maybe skip all the chaos that I created for myself. Don't be like me, guys. And since it's holiday season, the time to gather, host, and celebrate with the people you love, I want to see what you guys create. So send me your tables, your menus, your behind the scenes chaos. I want to see it. Let's really make this holiday season about real hosting, the messy kind that's magical and full of hearts. So welcome to Evenings with Funmi Volume 1. Let's talk about everything that went wrong and why it was still worth it. Now let's begin with phase 1, the concept and vision. Every dinner party starts with an idea. So before the menu, before the decor, before the stress, you have to have a vision. Something that feels too specific to explain, but clear enough that you can already see it in your head. So for me, the vision was simple. New York City at night, right? The kind of dinner that feels chic, grounded, and just a little moody. I really wanted a minimal chic aesthetic, something that was understated, but not fussy. But here's where I went wrong. And this is like a theme for the whole video. I didn't give myself enough time to bring the vision to life. I was determined to host my first dinner in October, even though I just moved from DC. I was still unpacking. I was juggling work and lots of travel. I really should have waited until November, but I rushed the process because I was super excited. But excitement and planning are not the same thing, guys, and don't get it twisted. One gives you energy, but the other gives you peace of mind. So if you don't build in time, you're going to end up stealing it from yourself later. And I learned that the hard way. So when you're planning any kind of event, the goal of this stage, the concept and vision stage, is to define the why. It's not really about the color palettes or the table settings yet. It's about gaining clarity. So why this dinner? Why now? What do you want people to feel when they sit at your table? So I knew my why immediately. I had just moved back to New York, as I said, and I wanted a night that marked that transition, a night that felt like a soft launch into my new life. And so the theme came to me by accident. I was in the elevator one day and I saw a flyer for a rooftop opening party. This is a new building. I signed up without thinking twice. I was really curious to see the rooftop and I was hoping to meet a few neighbors, so I wasn't really expecting much. It's a rooftop party. So I threw on some jeans and a sweater after work, nothing special. And I walked upstairs. Guys, when those elevator doors opened, I stepped into what looked like a scene from Selling Sunset, New York edition. Everyone was dressed to perfection. I was like, where am I? Everybody was in all Black, sleek silhouettes, effortless confidence New Yorkers seem to master and just exude. There was a live band, past hors d'oeuvres, an open bar, and even a raffle for an iPad. I stood there completely underdressed, looking around in utter disbelief. It took me a minute to realize that this wasn't even a residence event, right? It was a broker's open. It was a broker's open house for potential brokers to come and show future tenants. It wasn't really a party for the people that actually lived there. But as ridiculous as it was, that moment really stuck with me. I loved the look of it, the energy, the polish, the understated drama. Everybody was in Black and somehow it didn't feel harsh. It felt elevated, it felt elegant, it felt very New York. And that's when I decided my first dinner party would be all Black. So once the theme was set, I moved into my favorite part, the visual planning. Of course, I'm a researcher at heart. I love to research. So I opened Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, and I started to build out my mood boards. I saved everything that caught my eye in my dinner party folders and my Pinterest boards, modern flatware, moody candlelights, florals. So you want to create folders for each category. Make sure you have what you want tableware to look like, the food, the outfits, the lining. This is really going to help you keep the vision cohesive. And so when you're in this phase, it's easy to get lost in all these ideas. You have to kind of treat inspiration presentation like ingredients. You first collect everything and then you edit them down, okay? So I pulled images that felt cinematic, but still very achievable and attainable with my Amazon budget. I didn't want it to look staged. I wanted everything to feel very intentional. So one of my biggest inspirations for this was Olivia on TikTok. She really has a way of making her dinner parties feel effortless, always polished, but still very human. And I really always admired that balance. So my goal isn't to recreate what she does because I'm not her, but to find my own rhythm in the process. I want to create nights that are stylish and soulful and uniquely me. And that's also why I document everything. I want you to see not just the finished products, but the planning behind it, the choices I made, the chaos, and the tiny details that added up. Because people really underestimate how much emotional labor goes into hosting. It's not just about picking plates. You're holding space to create an experience that says you're welcome here. Now, if I could go back and do this phase differently, I'd definitely start earlier, right? I'd set a date after confirming that I had time to breathe before and after the event, because planning an entire dinner while adjusting to a new apartment and a full work schedule was really ambitious of me to the point of delusion. But I powered through. It did cost me some rest, peace of mind. So here's my advice. If you're planning your own dinner, give yourself more time than feels necessary. Start gathering inspo early, even if you don't have a date set. Build a vision board that reflects how you want people to feel, not just what you want them to see. Because the visuals are kind of easy, but it's the emotion that it takes, thought, that takes time to think and curate. And remember, your timeline is not flexible. You can change your color scheme, you can change the flower order, but you can't make more hours appear in the day. So the best host is a rested host, okay? Looking back, I realized the concept and vision phase isn't about controlling all the details. You want to prepare for imperfection. I always told myself that, things are never going to be perfect, so you set the tone and then you just surrender to whatever happens after. And honestly, I think that's where the magic lives. So that's how my dinner party began. One impulsive rooftop event, a little too much ambition, and a vision that came together just in time. Now tell me, guys, if you were hosting your own dinner party right now, what theme would you choose? What feeling would you want your guests to leave with? Let me know in the comments, because I need some ideas for my next dinner party. And remember, that's where the planning starts. It doesn't start with the menu, it doesn't start with the candles, but with the mood, with the vibes, with the aesthetic. So once I locked in the concept and the vision, it was time to move into what I call the design and planning phase. And this is where the real work begins. It's really translating your mood boards and that vision, your beautiful idea, into something tangible, right? So the goal here is to take the mood in your head and build a world that your guests can actually step into. But I'll be honest, this is also where I made some of my biggest mistakes. The first was not having a budget, so don't be like me, guys. I had just moved, like I said, I was unpacking boxes. I was still figuring out how I want my space set up. And I knew I'd be starting completely from scratch. But instead of planning for that, I just told myself, I'll deal with it as I go, which really meant I'll spend more money than I planned and justify it later. Period. So looking back, I should have paused before buying a single thing. I should have just made a simple spreadsheet or a list of everything I needed: plates, glassware, tablecloths, napkins, etc., which I did make a list, but I should have put some numbers to that list. Even just writing it down really helps you see what's realistic. But I literally shopped in panic mode. The Friday, a week before, I just scrolled Amazon and Wayfair and just bought everything, storing things into my cart, and I just bought it because they looked good and I knew that I could get it in that 2-day shipping, thank you Prime. It worked out, but it wasn't intentional. And that's my first real lesson for this phase. Don't confuse fast with prepared. If I built in time, I could have sourced unique pieces like smaller ceramics from Etsy, handmade linens, or just find more local finds that had more personality. But because I was pressed for time, I really leaned heavily on what could ship in 48 hours, and so that's not huge. So if you're planning your own event, give yourself time to shop with taste, not with last minute urgency. You'll always find something that looks fine. The challenge though is finding something that feels like you and the vision that you're trying to convey. Another thing people forget about this stage is that design isn't just aesthetic. You have to think about logistics. It's not all about styling the table here. You're creating an experience for your guests. And for me, that started with my guest count. I knew I wanted 8 people, which meant everything from the table layouts to the serving dishes had to be intentional. I only have 4 chairs and I have 2 benches that could seat 2 each. So that was specifically 8 people. That meant I had to be very clear about people RSVPing early and knowing who exactly was coming. I wanted to do naming cards, place cards, and things like that. So a small change, one extra guest, or a no-show can really shift how everything flows. So before I even touched my decor, I definitely made a list in my notes app and confirmed my guest count. So as a list, you want to check your seating layout, you want to order tableware, prep your candles, test the lighting, you want to confirm your menu items and things like that. So the list in my notes app really became my Bible. I checked it every day, crossing things off as deliveries came in. There's really just something so satisfying about lists. At least for me, I love a list. They really make the abstract parts of planning feel more tangible. They also keep you grounded when chaos hits, because let me tell you, nonsense is always going to come. And as the day approached, I started to think about the flow. I'm not a drawer, I'm not an artist by any means, so I didn't do any sketches or mock-ups, but I just think best through lists and structure. So again, I opened my notes app and started mapping out the event in bullet points. Morning, cleaning, errands, light breakfast, cook. Afternoon, set the table, finish prep, shower, hair, makeup. Evening, light the candles, turn on the music, guests arrive, enjoy yourself. It sounds simple, but that structure really started to help bring everything together for me in my mind. And I really wanted to be fully present when my guests walk in, not frazzled, not finishing my hair, finishing cooking while my guests are arriving. So that's why this phase, the design and plan phase, isn't really just about how things look. You want to think about the flow, how things move, and design an evening that is flowing well for your guests, where you're not running from the kitchen to the table to, here and there downstairs and get your guests. You really want your guests to feel cared for the moment they arrive. But of course, even with the list, the timing, the preparation, how I sound so prepared, I 100% underestimated how long everything would take. I thought I built in enough time to breathe, to film, because I'm also filming on top of this, to get dressed. But when you're juggling everything alone, there's really no such thing as enough time. So here's my honest advice from the other side. Whatever timeline you think you need, double it, okay? Double it. Give yourself grace and give yourself a buffer. And if you think setting up will take 1 hour, block off 2. I promise you block off 2 hours. If you think you'll be ready by 6, plan for 7, start that dinner party at 8. Time always disappears faster than you expect. And as I started to pull items together, I realized just how many tiny details go into hosting. It's not about the plates and stuff. You need trays, you need serving utensils, coasters, ice buckets, making sure you have salt and pepper for the guests, a water pitcher, napkin rings, name card holders, remembering to have backup lighters, extra trash bags, paper towels. So when you're the host, you're also the set designer, you're the chef, you're the stylist, you're the logistics manager, and the cleanup crew, especially when you're doing it all alone like I was. And then when you're filming at the same time, you're also the content team, the videographer, content creator, and the influencer. Write everything down. Even things that feel small or obvious because you just can't remember what you didn't write. You can't remember what you didn't write down, and then you're gonna forget. You're like, you're forgetting something you didn't write down. So those tiny oversights, like missing ice, forgotten matches, they're always what's gonna trip you up at the end of the day. So by the end of this phase, I had everything ordered, organized, and mapped out. The vision was tangible. I could see it. The black tableware, the glassware, the candles. I had my guest list confirmed. My invites were set out via Partyful. My timeline was ready. On paper, it all looked perfect. But as I would find out later, paper doesn't account for real life. Because here's the truth. Plans don't fail dramatically. They unravel slowly, one small oversight at a time. And that's exactly what happened next. So now we're at the preparation and coordination stage. This is usually the week of the event. This is where vision meets reality. And let me tell you, this is where things started to get real. Okay. If phase 2 was about design, this one is all about those logistics. And my biggest mistake here was underestimating time, per usual. That's a theme, like I said, of this whole video. So I decided that the same week I was supposed to be prepping for this dinner party, I could still squeeze in other things. I had to have a social life. I had errands to do. I had work, of course. Like hosting wasn't a full production. I thought I was being really efficient, but really I was spreading myself too thin. So if you're hosting, learn from me, give yourself more time than you think you need, and then double it, because everything takes longer when you're doing it yourself. So the first major task was finalizing my menu and grocery list. So I wanted the dinner to feel nostalgic and elevated at the same time. So I'm Nigerian, so of course I had to take it home with suya, jollof rice, plantain, shrimp, etc. And I really wanted to do a signature mocktail, but that suya broke me, guys. Since I moved back to New York City, I really assumed that I could find suya spice pretty easily. I went to 3 different African stores and came up empty. So I decided to make it from scratch. I got all the spices, I blended the seasonings, the peanuts and spices together. But instead of getting a dry rub, I ended up with a paste. I ended up with some peanut butter. So I tried to fix it by just melting it down. The consistency was kind of off, but I had to make it work. And mistake number 2 came. I bought thinly sliced ribeye from H Mart, thinking that it would make skewering the suya meat easier, but instead it kind of fell apart. And it became almost like ground beef, versus individual meat slices. So I was like, okay, this is not the suya tutorial I watched. I didn't even watch a tutorial. I kind of just, put things together. But at this point, I only had 2 options: start over or adapt. And I chose to adapt. That was one of the biggest lessons of event prep. You can plan for weeks and weeks on end, but the ability to pivot in the moment is going to really save you your sanity. By Friday, the day before the dinner party, I knew I had to start cooking. I couldn't do everything the next day on Saturday. So, I blended down my peppers for the stew base that I would use for the jollof rice and the stewed chicken. I marinated both the beef suya and the shrimp suya in that pasty sauce that I made. But even that, I did it all too late. And in hindsight, I should have just cooked the whole jollof the night before. I should have skewered the meats on Friday. So I should have marinated them on Thursday, so that all I had to do on Saturday was some reheating, plating, and the finishing touches. And that's another truth about this phase. Your energy is your real currency. No matter how organized your lists are, you can't buy focus or stamina the day before your events. Looking back, I could feel the dinner shifting from fun, exciting to a performance. And that was the moment I realized that I was chasing perfection instead of presence. So here's what I would do differently. Cook what you can as early as possible. Prep sauces, bases, marinades 2 or 3 days in advance. Don't wait to make things fresh if freshness will cost you your peace of mind. And honestly, I'm still debating whether to hire a private chef for future dinners. Like, I love cooking. It's like really, really grounding for me, but it's also super exhausting. And maybe for certain themes or bigger dinners, I'll bring help in. But for now, I'm experimenting. 1 month it might be me cooking, another might be catered, another might be a potluck. Hosting should evolve with your season. So don't ever think like you have to always cook everything yourself and do everything yourself either. Enlist your guests for help. So the night before the dinner, I finally sat down and took my rough outline and built out a full hour-by-hour timeline for Saturday. I thought it looked pretty flawless. I was going to wake up at 8. I had my cleaners coming at 8. And while the cleaners were here, I was going to run to Trader Joe's for ice and drinks, which I should have bought the day before. I was going to be back by 10, and I was going to start my setup by 12, and the guests were going to arrive by 7. I would have time to film everything. Even on paper, I even had an hour of buffer time, which was really cute of me. That was so cute. Another mistake I made, and I cannot stress this enough, was cutting things too close. Some of my key items didn't even arrive until Friday. Thankfully, everything made it in time, but that's not a strategy, guys. That's just luck. That's just pure luck. Had even one delivery been delayed, I would have had no backups. And when everything did arrive, I made the rookie mistake of leaving it in the box. I didn't open or test anything until the time I was putting it onto the table. That meant I was discovering problems in real time. The serving trays were smaller than I expected, and I wish I had more glasses. If you're hosting an event, make sure you open your packages early. You don't want to find out on the day of that half of your plan doesn't actually fit together. And let me tell you guys, by the end of this week, the day before the event, I was tired. I've been working, running errands, filming, cooking nonstop. I wanted the dinner to feel effortless, but the prep was anything but. And still, that's part of the lesson. The preparation stage is supposed to be heavy, right? Preparation is the invisible work. Nobody claps for the person who marinated the meat 3 days early or picked up the ice before it sold out. But those are the small and glamorous steps that are what make the evening beautiful. So when you're planning your own event, build room for that invisible work, right? Don't just budget for the decor or the food, budget for your energy. The most expensive thing you'll spend while you're hosting is your time. So looking back, I realized something, preparation isn't about eliminating the chaos, but you really want to create structure and handle it with grace. So if you're planning your own event or your own dinner, please learn from me. Give yourself double the prep time you think you'll need. Start cooking early because peace is way more important than perfection. Confirm every delivery and open every box before the event so you can make sure everything works, everything fits. Build a detailed timeline, but understand that it's flexible by design. Preparation doesn't end when the table is set. It ends when you stop trying to control every little thing and start trusting yourself to adapt. And that's really critical. So by Friday night, I had everything ready. The food was prepped. The items were delivered. The timeline was written, but I was also running on fumes. And the next day would test every ounce of focus I had left. Everything was ready except me. And that's where things really started to unravel. And now we've made it to the most important stage, the execution stage, the day of. This is the part that either makes or breaks you. And let me tell you guys, it almost broke me, okay? As a former wedding planner, this is really supposed to be my zone. It's all about day of coordination. I know timing, structure, flow. I'm so good at all of it. But hosting in your own home is a different beast. It's personal. You're the planner, you're the chef, you're the decorator, you're the host. There's really no one to hand tasks off to. And that morning, I learned that lesson in real time. So I started the day early. I was up before 8 a.m. because the cleaners were coming. My plan was simple. I'm going to run to Trader Joe's for juice and be back by 10, let the cleaners finish, and have the whole afternoon to prep. In my mind, I was already ahead of schedule. That confidence was my first mistake. So I got the drinks quickly and then thought, I have time to grab ice and maybe a few more snacks. And then one errand turned into 3. And by the time I walked back through my door, it was 11 a.m. Still, I somehow, some delusional way convinced myself that I was fine. I told myself I'm going to eat something, have a little rest, and then start everything at 1. So I took a little nap, and that nap was my downfall, guys. The schedule I carefully mapped out the night before was already slipping, and I didn't even realize it. When I woke up from my nap, it was 1 o'clock, and for some reason I was feeling behind, but I tried to keep calm. So of course I started my makeup first because I planned to film content while setting the table and cooking, which looking back was wildly ambitious. So I wanted to look polished in every shot. I didn't want to scramble in the sweats, in my sweatpants when the camera is rolling. But then I went to iron my dress, and I promise you guys, I spent 30 minutes tearing my apartment apart looking for that dress, only for it to be hanging neatly in my closet. My closet is color-coded, so it wasn't in the color-coded dress section of the closet. It was still hanging in the closet. But at that point, I just laughed because you just have to. What can you do? I was like, whatever. I just threw on some loungewear. I was like, I gotta cook, film or not, I gotta cook. And you guys will see the film, like, you don't really see me. The first thing I had to do was these suya skewers that were stressing me out. They came back around too because the meat had softened so much at this point that I had to shape and stick them together carefully to the skewer so that they wouldn't fall apart. And that took forever. And I had just done my nails. I did my nails 10 minutes before white nails got stained from the curry. So I was just one step away from tossing these skewers out the window. And while that was happening, the jollof rice was dangerously close to burning. I'm so happy I saved that. I just caught it right in time and it gave it that smoky vibes, not burnt vibes. The salad did come together quickly because I just shredded everything, chopped it really fast, but everything else was moving way slower than I planned. And here's where I had another realization. I'm a slow cook. I like to take my time. I like to taste as I go. And cooking is really meditative for me, but the dinner parties are not meditation. Dinner parties are choreography, and you have to know your rhythm, and mine is 2 hours minimum no matter what I'm making. You just have to know yourself and accept who you are. And that's fine for a casual meal, but that's not fine when you're juggling 10 dishes. So by 4 o'clock, I was behind it. I was sweating. The table wasn't set. My hair was still in rollers. My timeline was a joke. It was collapsing at that point. So I told myself that no matter what happened, I had to stop cooking at 6, because by 6, I had to fix my hair, touch up my makeup, and set the table. That was a non-negotiable. But around 5:30, I was chopping onions. And of course, I started to cry because of these onions, and it ruined my, the eye makeup. And, that's when it hit me, That's when I really knew that I should have cooked everything the night before, But I paused, I dabbed my eyes as much as I could. I redid my makeup, and I went straight into setup mode. So this was around 6:30 when I started to set the table. So I didn't open the candles and put them in the candlestick holders, only to learn that they didn't fit. The appetizers were nowhere near ready, So I really felt the stress rising as the time was ticking. 6:40, 6:50. I kept telling myself, don't panic, the guests won't remember what's missing. They'll only remember how it feels. At least that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm telling myself. By 7:20, I would say, the guests started arriving, and I definitely was not done. And that, I think, is every host's nightmare, hearing the doorbell ring when the kitchen still looks like a crime scene. But, here's the thing. At the end of the day, they didn't care, right? Everyone came in, they complimented the setup, they grabbed a drink and started chatting, and I had appetizers out within 15 minutes, and that bought me some more time to finish up cooking. I also made a mocktail that could easily turn into a cocktail so my pregnant guests could enjoy too. That's something I always prioritize, making sure every guest feels considered. So, you guys make sure you're asking about those dietary restrictions and preferences and comfort. They all matter. I even asked all of them if they were comfortable being on film. And then one of my friends, bless her, jumped in to help me fry the plantains. I could have cried from relief. And then, something shifted in that moment. Once she started helping, I really just let things go, and I stopped trying to control everything. I let people talk, laugh, pour drinks, and just exist, right? By the time dinner was served, the apartment was glowing, candles were flickering, the music was low. My friends were laughing around the table. And I stood there looking at them and thought, this is it. This is the why. This is why I did all of this, not just for the aesthetic, right? It's not about the aesthetic at the end of the day, not for the content, really. It's for the connection, to be there with my friends, to catch up. Because regardless of how chaotic the day was, once everyone sat down at the table, I felt at peace. And I told myself, I did it. It's not perfect, but it's enough. And everyone ate, we talked, we refilled our glasses, and at some point I stopped thinking about the timeline, and I just listened, and I enjoyed myself. And it was a great time with my girls, and I'm so happy to be back in New York. So by 12:30, the last guest had left, and I was exhausted. But in true planner fashion, I couldn't go to bed without cleaning. It's that event mindset. You never leave a venue in disarray. So I did a 1-hour reset. I quickly cleared the tablescape, loaded the dishwasher, wiped down the countertops, put everything back in its new place. And by the time I finished, it was 3 a.m. when I finally sat on my couch with a glass of water, looking at a spotless apartment, like no event ever happened. And I promise you guys, it was worth every second, because waking up the next morning with my feet on fire, but to a clean space felt like great closure. And it was like that exhale after all the chaos I went through. So the day of your event will never go exactly as planned, guys. That's something you just have to get used to. Something will break, someone will run late, something will go wrong, and none of it will matter if you let it go at the right time. So it's not, hosting people is not about executing a perfect event as much as we want it to be. It's really about knowing when to surrender, when to pivot, and when to just sit down and enjoy the people you brought together and all your hard work. That's what execution really means to me. It's not just about getting things done. You're being present for the moment you've worked so hard to create. The final stage for me is always reflection and follow-up. Every event ends, but a good host knows it isn't really over until you close the loop. So after every dinner or every event, I take a moment to thank my guests, usually a short phone call or a text the next morning. Just something simple like, thank you for coming last night. You made it so special. It's really about acknowledging the time and the commitment, they took out of their day to come and celebrate with you. Most people will bring a bottle of wine or a small gift, so it's always nice to thank them for that. But even if they don't, they brought their energy, their laughter, and their time, and that deserves gratitude. So you guys remember, hospitality doesn't stop when the candles go out. It extends into how you make people feel once they've left your table. Once those thank you messages were sent, I do what I like to call my post-event debrief. This is where I kind of replay the evening in my head like I'm editing a film, not really to criticize myself, but to understand what worked and what didn't. And for this first inaugural dinner party, I learned a lot, right? I didn't capture as much content as I wanted at all, maybe half of what I planned. And I wasn't as present as I hoped I'd be. And I don't want to be too hard on myself for that, because between cooking, plating, filming, I really felt split in two: the host, the documentarian, the videographer, everything. So that's something I'll have to always manage, finding the line between sharing my life and living it. Still, I think the night was a success, right? The energy was right, the food came together, my friends left happy, and that's what matters. The perfectionist in me, really had to accept that the first dinners are never flawless, but this is going to be the blueprint, right? You can't improve on what you don't attempt. That reflection, the combination of what worked and what didn't, actually is what inspired this entire video. I realized the lessons were too valuable to keep to myself, and that's how Evenings with Funmi truly began. Now I'm already thinking about the next one. I want to shift the format a bit, something less structured and formal, maybe a little more organic, more like a house party meets Friendsgiving potluck. Guests bringing their favorite dishes, but not relying on me to cook the whole menu. I'm still deciding whether I want to host it in my apartment or in one of my rentable spaces in the building. But my space really has that cozy lived-in intimacy that I love. But those rooms offer space and easier cleanup. I think it's going to come down to balance, the effort that I'm going to have to put in, the budget, and the type of energy I want to create. Because hosting, I'm realizing, is really a constant negotiation between ambition, and I'm ambitious, and the capacity. And that's what I need to realize. The event should expand your joy, not your stress. If the dinner taught me anything, it's that every event is you're just going to get better and better. You're going to refine, you're going to adjust, you're going to get better at pacing yourself. And when I think about what's ahead, Friendsgiving, Christmas, my birthday, Valentine's Day, etc., I feel excited instead of anxious. I know what to fix with this dinner party. I know where to delegate and how to build in grace when plans shift. So this reflection stage is what turns an event into an experience. It's where the craft lives, not just the design, the tablescape, the menu, but the self-awareness that follows, right? So if you're hosting your own dinner, think about it like this when you're reflecting. What made you proud? What made you tense? And how will you adjust next time? That's how you grow as a host, not by chasing perfection, but by practicing presence again and again. So that's the full cycle, guys. The 5 phases of planning an event. Phase 1, the concept and vision, where every great evening begins. It's where you define the why, the mood, the purpose, and the story you want the night to convey. Phase 2, the design and planning. This is where that story starts to take shape. You source, you budget, you sketch out the flow, the timeline, and you figure out how to turn your inspo into something tangible. Phase 3, preparation and coordination. That's the work behind the beauty, confirming your menu, prepping the ingredients, scheduling deliveries, managing the moving parts that nobody sees, that invisible work. Phase 4 is the execution, the day of the event. It's where everything you imagine collides with real life, okay? So the stress, the laughter, the pivots, the chaos, all of it, that's where it comes to life. In phase 5, the reflection and follow-up, the quiet moment after it's all over, you send your thank yous, you review what worked, what didn't, and start dreaming about the next one. Each phase teaches you something new about hosting, about planning, about yourself, because it's never just about the event. It's about the experience of creating something that brings people together. So if this dinner showed me anything, it's that hosting is a mirror. It shows you where you're patient, and it shows you where you're rigid, and where you still need to soften. And every event gives you another chance to get it right, or at least right for you. So if you're planning to host something this season, big or small, chaotic or calm, start somewhere. Pick a date, set the table, and let the night unfold. And when you do, don't forget to tag me because I want to see how you make it your own. Feel free to use the hashtag Evenings with Funmi so I can share your dinners, your tables. I can get inspo from y'all and we get inspo from each other, because Evenings with Funmi was never just about me hosting. It's about creating a community of people who gather, create, and connect with intention. So here's to every imperfect, beautiful dinner to come. Thanks, guys, so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.